In this video, I'm going to give you some more intermediate tips to help you out when using the reduction method for the 4x4. The first tip that I'm going to give you now is to solve your first center on the bottom face. So like how we started out by solving our cross on the top face in the beginner method, and then eventually we transitioned into solving it on the bottom face, we can do the same thing with the first center. So here, for example, if we want to solve the white center, we have these two pieces and these two pieces. And so instead of pairing these two up and then putting them up here, what we can do is actually put these two on the bottom, and notice that we're holding them on the bottom left, so on the left side here, so that any R and U moves on the right hand side won't affect these. So we can then pair up these two by doing something like this. So U prime to move this one over, R prime to pair those two up, U, and then do an R2 to actually solve that first center onto the bottom. And then we can go straight away and solve the opposite, the yellow center on the top face here without doing a big rotation after the first center. The next tip that I can give you is a slightly more advanced tip. However, it's something you can do once you get a little bit more comfortable and a bit better at solving the centers. So basically, as you're, for example, inserting this white bar into the bottom to solve your first center, you may want to actually do some different things, some different moves, or add in an additional move to influence the creation of this second center. So here, for example, we have these two, and we have this yellow piece back here, and this yellow piece up here. So when we do a wide R prime, like that, this yellow piece comes from the back here to this position here, like that. And that's fine. We get two pieces, but they're actually diagonally opposite one another. When we really want to be building lines, it makes our lives a lot easier if we build a line for the second center and then make another line and insert it. So instead of doing the R prime straight away, what we can actually do is do a U prime first to move this centerpiece from there to there. Then when we do our wide R prime, these two get paired up and we can insert the last two centerpieces into the top a little bit more easily. So the next tip I can give you is if you're solving the second center on the top here, there probably isn't a need to rotate, pair up these two, for example, then rotate back and insert them into the top. What you can really do, to make your life a lot easier is just use the U slice, or if need be, the wide D slice to actually pair up centerpieces. So in this case, we have this one and this one. So if we do an L and then a wide U, they get paired up as follows on this left face. Or instead of doing a U, we can also do a wide D like that, which brings them to this front face and we don't need to rotate at all. And then we can insert these into the top layer. And if you're using your right hand, for the most part, instead of doing L prime U2 L like that, you can do it more like R prime F2 R to insert those last two, which might be a little bit easier. Essentially, it's the same moves, but it just might be a little bit more finger trick friendly if you do it as R prime F2 R like that. And then after you've done the opposite centers, only then should you do a Z rotation, so that is a rotation of the cube in this direction to complete your last four centers. So similarly to how we solved the white center on the bottom, again for our third center, what it's a good idea to do is actually get used to solving the third center on either the back or on the bottom face to leave the front and the top face unsolved and make you look ahead a little bit easier. So for example, if we solve the third center on the bottom, then we can easily go ahead and look ahead into, solving the front one or even solving the back one if need be. So for example, here we have this line, and this is actually our only line that we see on the cube, but for example, let's say we're in this position after solving our first two centers. It's probably easiest to just straight away pick this line, find the other two centers, and then solve the entire center, as opposed to trying to look elsewhere if there's anything a little bit easier. Probably just go with the first thing you see for centers, because look ahead isn't too hard. So we've got these two, and we want to insert these two. So what we can do to insert these two into the back over here, because this is on the left hand side, we can just use U and R moves and outer slice moves, outer turn moves, sorry. So using just one layer, turning just one layer at a time, and using this right face, we can do like that to insert those into the back. And then obviously once you're more familiar with your color scheme, you should know that red also belongs here on this face. So we've got these two, and the last two red centerpieces are here and here. So we can do something like this. I think the easiest and most finger trick friendly way to do these two is do U prime, R prime, just to pair these two up. And then what we should do is, if we do a U to move these over here, and then do another wide R prime, we've got these two in the back here, which are only a wide R2 off. And then when we do a U2, like that, the wide R2 solves both this center and pairs up this center again. So that's how we would solve, for example, the red center on the bottom, and then we do a rotation like that, and there's only two more centers to solve. So there's a few different cases that you'll potentially get for your last two centers. So here we have quite an easy one where we have three centers already correctly positioned, and all it needs to be done is to put this one down here. And the easiest way to do this, for example, is to just do U2, pair up these two with an R, do a U, and then a wide R prime, like that. So here are some of the other cases that we can get. So in this case, we just have 4 bars of 2 pieces. So here it's just really easy. The easiest case probably is just do R, U2, R prime, like that. Here we have a case where we have bars on one face and a checker pattern on another face. And there are very, very many various combinations depending on how these pieces are rotated around the front and the top face. But for this example, what I would do is do an RU, R prime, to pair up those two without breaking this up, then do an F prime, then do a wide R, U2, R prime. And that's something you'll need to experiment with. So for the case where you have 2 bars and a checker pattern, either you'll have the bars here and the checker pattern here, or you could potentially have the bars here and the checker pattern here. You should play around and try and figure out the most optimal solutions for those. So using that case that I just showed you before as your kind of starting example case. If, for example, we only have one correctly positioned center, then what we should do is create a line. So we can do that in, again, a variety of different ways. So for example, here, let's pair up this one with this one by doing an L, F, L prime. And then all we need to do is we have 2 bars, so just insert them as per normal. So another case you can run into is where you have the checker pattern on both the top and the front face. And this case isn't actually too bad. All that you do need to do is be aware of which colors obviously belong on the front and the top face, and then make sure that the 2 center stickers here and here are the same, and here are the same. So it's like having a mirror here and reflecting this orientation, these center pieces over on this side. So this is incorrect because those aren't the same. This way is correct, and what we can do then is either do an R prime or an R, and that'll create 2 bars. And then, for example, here, if we want to put the green ones on the top, we can do an R, move those across with a U. Then when we rotate back, we over-rotate by doing an R2 to pair up these other 2 green ones, and then do an F and put them into the top like that. And again, these are the cases that you can try and experiment with depending on how they are rotated around the front and top face. If you do happen to run into a case where you have the centers swapped, it's pretty easy to sort of put these green ones up here and put these orange ones down here. All you need to do is do R, U2, R2, F2, R, like that. If you're doing the last 2 centers and you can't exactly remember which centers you have on the back and the bottom, it's easier to just do a quick look onto the bottom to check what color's on the bottom instead of looking over all the way to the back. So it's easy to just tilt slightly. And so, for example, here we see that the blue is on the bottom, so that the green belongs on the top. So that's something you can do really quickly if you can't remember and you need to try and figure out which colors belong either on the top and the front. As I mentioned in the beginner videos, make sure you're color neutral when you're building your centers. So that is, be able to build the first 2 centers on any different colors and in order to take advantage of easy starts. The other thing to remember is always build your third and fourth center adjacent to one another as opposed to opposite one another. It's obviously a little bit harder to do this and think about the color scheme, but trying to build your last two centers opposite one another is really, really painful and actually takes quite a long time. So it's a lot easier to build your last two centers adjacent to one another, and for that reason, you should build your third and your fourth centers also adjacent to one another to set up for that case.